Welcome back to Straight Painting. I'm your host, Zach, and on today's project, we will focus on the work of Lawren Harris, my favorite painter of the Group of Seven. Lawren Harris was born in 1885 in Brantford, Ontario, and was a founding member of Canada's Group of Seven, an association of Canadian painters who helped to define Canada's growing national identity, which was emerging after the nation's martial exploits of the Great War. The group aimed to paint the Canadian scene on its own terms, focusing on landscape paintings of the wilderness, first in and around Algonquin Park and the Lake Huron-Georgian Bay area in Ontario, and then expanding further west and north across the country. Lawren's own travels saw him painting the country from what at the time was the Dominion of Newfoundland down east, to British Columbia out west, and to the Northwest Territories, now the territory of Nunavut, in the north. You can learn more about his work at the Group of Seven website, the Art Gallery of Ontario, or the McMichael Canadian Art Collection, and I'll include links to these sites in the description box below. Lawren's style changed over the years, as his interest in theosophy, transcendentalism, and a search for deeper spiritual meaning grew. What started out by being a very realistic style grew more abstract over the years. His earliest works focused mainly on the urban surroundings of the Ward neighborhood in Toronto and Algoma during boxcar trips. They featured very rich, bright colors with decorative compositions, and like all his work, contained a soft roundedness to them that makes them appear almost cartoonish in nature to me. In Northern Painting 25, we find an island of trees in northern Ontario, and each has its own distinct identity, both in their color variations and in their depictions. Lawren's rounding and softness allow each tree to reveal something about their character, and if made today, wouldn't look out of place as a concept piece for a Disney or Pixar film, most likely named Trees. As Lawren continued his exploration of the country, he made his way to the north shore of Lake Superior, Anishinaabe Gitchagumi in Anishinaabewan, where his style changes and begins to depict a sublime order, conveying a spirituality to the landscape through a more austere, simplified style using a limited palette. His belief in painting the country was that it had to be seen and lived with, and painted with complete devotion to its own life and spirit before it yields its secrets. In North Shore Lake Superior, also called the Old Stump Lake Superior, we find an old, likely lightning-struck tree, still standing, clinging to the rocks and looking out over the lakehead as the rays of the sun shine down to warm its spot. There's a deep spirituality to this piece, and it has an almost religious motif to it, with the tree taking the place of a cross, and the rays of sun being the grace of the divine shining down. Looking at this piece and knowing Lawren's interest in theosophy, which is the teaching of God and the world based on mystical insight, and transcendentalism, a belief in the essential unity of all creation, it seems to be leading me as the viewer to believe that despite the progress of modernity, the natural world will still be there, hanging on, waiting to be discovered again. The subdued palette of browns, blues, blacks, and whites carries through much of his later work, like this piece, Mount Lefroy, from his time in Alberta. His use of banding the outcroppings into defined sections helps us grasp the height and verticality of the mount, which dominates the frame. The lines lead our eye towards the mountain's peak, where the light of the sun is shining, and delivering us out of the gloom of the base. Lawren's work from Nunavut represents the end of his landscape painting, after which he took up painting abstract scenes, and it also represents the height of his vision of nature's spiritual power. In Figure of Rays of Light, we find a tall obelisk of ice standing alone in the center of the frame, with bright clouds above, allowing rays of light to shine down around the figure, giving it a quality that evokes paintings of the Madonna, with the rays of light replacing the halo around her head. The piece that I have chosen to paint for my practice is Baffin Island, or Baffin Island Mountains. The scene is from the eastern shore of the island, Qikiqtaaluk in Inuktitut, and represents a crop of ice-covered mountains at the end of a semi-iced over bay. The rings of blue sky above the mountains seem to be radiating back the sun, up into the atmosphere, making the mountains like a mirror reflecting back the light of the viewer, which keeps Lawren's views on spirituality in mind. To accomplish this piece, I will want to focus on keeping a round softness to the shapes of each mountain in the scene, as well as clearly defined values to create the banding in the sky. And how did we do? All right. We've now got a completed card here. So before I shuffle up against some friends, I'm going to do a quick review of it with you, and we'll see how I feel about the card. Overall, I feel like I've nailed both of my goals. The first one, which was to make sure that I had a consistent and clearly visible gradient for the values in the sky. And the second one, which was to maintain a softness or a roundness to each of the shapes so that nothing was too hard-edged in the piece. And I've accomplished both of those things, so I'm happy about that. Now, there are a couple things that I think I could improve on if I were to repaint this card, and there's something that's sort of general knowledge for painting a card. And the first one is, in the sky, there are some areas where there's these little sort of streaks or like bubbles almost. And that simply happens because I was too quick to apply that layer of paint before allowing the initial layer to dry completely. And so the paint kind of moves away as you try to paint over. So there's two ways that you can combat that. The first one is to take more time, allow everything to dry before you apply your next layer. The second one is to, after it has dried, go back and reapply the same color to the same area again. Or the third one would be, as you're going along, to use your finger and to dab down on the paint that you've applied, which helps to blend it in to the final canvas, essentially. So that's the first improvement that I would make. The second one is the water at the bottom here. In order to match Lawren Harris's piece exactly, it would need to be a little bit more green. However, as my attempt at interpreting it for a magic card, I'm happy with the color that I've ended up with, especially because it's at the bottom of the piece and it's not the focal point of the card. The final takeaway that I want to leave you with, as always, is to remember that the effort you put in is more important than the perfection you achieve. And that is to say that the more you try, the better you'll get. You just have to try. All right. I've put some top coat down on this card to seal in the paint, which you can see in the glare on the sides here. And it's now ready to be sleeved up in my deck so that I can play against some friends and show them this card that I created. Until next time, I hope that you take care, and I will see you again in 2 weeks' time for another painting project. All right. Peace.